And let me just see, let's start off with the roll call.
Okay, Mohammed Job. Gray Farron.
I think he is here, but
I'm
there we
here.
go.
Okay, Kim Gleason. Tammy Colby.
Good morning, everyone.
Lyle Jepson.
Here.
Tom Lovett.
Here.
Jenna O'Farrell.
Here.
Jennifer Samuelson.
Here, good morning.
Rich Werner.
Here.
Aaliyah Wilburn.
Here.
And Heather Boucher.
Here. All right, thank you. Are there any, well, there is one amendment to the agenda because we need to postpone agenda item L. Ted Fisher was scheduled to provide the legislative update, but he's working at the State Emergency Operations Center and is unable to make today's meeting. So we're going to postpone that. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item B, which is the welcome and oath of allegiance and oath of office for our new student members. So you all will recall we had 2 graduating seniors who just left us last month. So they are going to be replaced. We have Aaliyah Wilburn, who is going to take over Amara's second year. So she will be our new voting member and will only be with us for this 1 year. And then we have Gray Farron, who will be the non-voting member this year and will advance to voting member next year. So with that in mind, I'm going to start first by administering the oaths. And then I figure Aaliyah and Gray, if you could each just take a couple of minutes and introduce yourselves, let us know where you are, where you're going to school, any particular interest that you might have. I'll turn it over to you then. But Aaliyah, I'm going to start with you. So we have 2 affirmations, and then I'm going to read it, and then you just need to indicate that you will. So this is the affirmation of allegiance for Aaliyah Wilburn. Do you solemnly affirm that you will be true and faithful to the state of Vermont, and that you will not directly or indirectly do any act or thing injurious to the Constitution or government thereof, under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Great. And this is the affirmation of office. Do you solemnly affirm that you will faithfully execute the office of member of the State Board of Education and will therein do equal right and justice to all persons to the best of your judgment and ability according to the law, under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Great. All right. And Gray, I'm going to turn this over to you now. This is for Gray Farron. The affirmation of allegiance. Do you solemnly affirm that you will be true and faithful to the state of Vermont and that you will not directly or indirectly do any act or thing injurious to the Constitution or government thereof, under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Great. And the affirmation of office. Do you solemnly affirm that you will faithfully execute the office of member of the State Board of Education and will therein do equal right and justice to all persons to the best of your judgment and ability according to law, under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Great. So let me turn it over to you guys. If you're able to turn on your camera, feel free. I know that sometimes that really compromises your ability to connect. So if you can't, that's totally understandable. But I'll turn it over to you, Aaliyah, if you want to start first.
Can you see me?
Mm.
Yeah. No, I don't know what's going on.
Kim can't, or I'm sorry, Tammy can.
Tammy can.
I can't
Okay, I don't know why it's. I can't even see myself. Do you know? I don't know. Someone can and someone can't. Well, as we're trying to figure this out, I'm Aaliyah Wilburn. I live in. Oh, that works. Wow. Heck. Sorry, I'm currently in a hotel room, but I live in Derby, Vermont. I go to school at North Country Union High School, and I'm going into my senior year. I do a lot of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and my principal recommended me to apply for this position for the Vermont State Board of Education. And I was like, yeah, like anything I can do to create change in any aspect of our school system possible is a great way to create change. So that's why I'm here.
So,
Is there
Analia,
anything else?
well, you moved here to Vermont from Georgia, is that right?
Yes, yes. I'm actually in Georgia right now. Yeah, I moved to Vermont from the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm originally from Florida, but I moved here about almost 2 years ago now. So
That's great. And were you okay with the flooding, your house, your school?
yeah, I think Newport got like the not as hard hitting part of it. But definitely like if you go like 15 minutes out, you can see where the damage is a lot. So Newport and Derby is in decent hands, but I know that surrounding areas are getting hit pretty hard.
When do you go back to school?
We go back to school August 29th. 29th.
All right, so you still have some time left.
Yeah.
As a Falcon alumni, I'd like to especially welcome Aaliyah. So I'm a graduate of North Country Union High School and proud of it. Quite some time ago.
All right. Well, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Aaliyah? Okay. Well, thank you and welcome. And Gray, I will now turn it over to you.
My name is Gray Fearon, and I'm a student at Virgins Union High School. I found out about the board and that there are student members on the board totally randomly by reading, I don't even remember what it was, some report online that mentioned a student member of the Board of Education. So I thought that was cool, and I went around trying to find links to apply somewhere, and eventually I did, and I'm really happy that I'm here. So it's nice to meet everyone.
And your house is okay? You're fine with flooding?
Yep. Virgins has not been super effective, which is funny because we live right along Otter Creek. But the water level has, gone up a ton, but there are no houses that are right there. So for the most part, there's not a lot of major flooding or anything. Nothing has really been canceled in any huge way. It's been pretty okay for us here.
Great. And when do you go back to school?
That's a great question. I have no idea when school starts for me.
That's a lovely
Sometime late August. I know when sports start back again. That's August 17th, but I'm not sure exactly when the actual date of school starting is. I think like 2 weeks after that. It's sometime at the end of August.
Okay. Do you play a sport?
I run year round. I do cross country in the fall. So I'm ready for that.
Excellent. All right. Any other comments or questions for Gray? So, all right. Well, we are very pleased to have both of you join us. I think I've mentioned this when the three of us met a little last week, that we really do love the student perspective. It kind of, keeps it real for us and grounds our work. And the student updates are usually the best parts of the meeting. So really happy to have you guys here and look forward to working with you both.
Thank you.
All right, so this takes us to agenda item C. If there are any members of the public who wish to be heard, if you are in the meeting, you may raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you could push *5 to raise your hand. Okay, I see Jeff Francis. And just a reminder, well, two reminders. One is you have a 2-minute time limit. And the second thing is you are always welcome to submit any comments that you have prepared to Maureen and Suzanne to be included with the minutes. So with that, Jeff, I will turn it to you.
Thanks very much. I noted on the agenda that you have a resolution for Donna Russo Savage. I had a couple of comments that I wanted to make about Donna's service to the state and to public education. And I wondered whether now was the time to do it, or whether you would rather allow a comment at the time that you consider the resolution.
Well, that is a good question, and I'm not sure. I know Donna was going to try to log on early. Maureen or Suzanne, do we know if Donna's with us?
Donna is not on the call just yet.
Okay. So Jeff, let me have you pause there for a second. Are there any other members of the public who wish to be heard not related to Donna? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. What we can do, because I understand what you're saying, and I think it would be lovely to have Donna be able to, hear what you're saying. So why don't we leave this agenda item open for the 15 minutes? And if someone could let me know when Donna joins us, maybe we can just pop over to that, sort of tack on some public comment, do the resolution for Donna, if that works
I
for
can
everybody.
text her also. I'll text her right now to see if we have an ETA.
Yeah, well, I think she was going to try to log on early because we did talk about the agenda. So while we're doing that, let's move on to board announcements. Are there any announcements from any members of the board? The one thing I did want to double check and remind everyone is that our August meeting will be held virtually on August 9th. We typically hold our meetings the third Wednesday of the month, but the third Wednesday of August is Bennington Battle Day, which is a state holiday. So with that in mind, we have decided that we're going to move our meeting to August 9th. And I believe we have Kim, Lyle, Tom, Jenna, and I have all indicated that we'll be able to attend. Is there anyone else on the board who definitely knows whether they will or will not be able to attend?
I'm scheduled to be driving back up from vacation that day, but I will just see if I can rearrange that.
Okay, I think we do have a quorum, but then obviously it sort of gets into, wanting to make sure that we have enough people there to, do the work that will be on the schedule. So I guess for those of you who have not responded, if you can let Maureen or Suzanne know whether you're a definite yes or a definite no, I think that would be helpful. Any other board announcements? Okay, so let's move on to agenda item F, which is we have two meetings whose minutes we need to approve. So I'm going to start with the June 21st, 2023. This was our regularly scheduled monthly meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All right, it's been moved by Tom Levitt. Is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of our June 21st, 2023 meeting, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 I see Richard has raised his hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Are there any abstentions? Okay. Hearing none, the minutes of our June 21st, 2023 meeting have been approved. And then moving on to the special meeting on June 29th, 2023, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Been moved by Lyle Jepson. Is there a second?
Kim?
Seconded by Kim. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of our June 29th, 2023 meeting, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 And Richard also has raised his hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? All right, the motion has carried. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair Samuelson?
Yes.
Donna is on the call or in the meeting.
Great. All right. Donna, welcome, and thank you for coming early. So at this point, I'm going to circle back to public comment if there are any members of the public who wish to be heard. Jeff, I know that you've been waiting patiently, and so why don't we start with you and see if there's anyone else.
I really appreciate it. Good morning. I'm happy to be here with you. Hi, Donna. I saw on the agenda the resolution for Donna marking her great contributions to the agency and to public education. And I thought I would be remiss if I didn't come on behalf of myself and the Vermont Superintendents Association, really to say this. If there was a Hall of Fame for contributors to public education in Vermont, and it hadn't been established, Donna would be an inaugural member. And if it had been established, she would get inducted on the first ballot. In my period of observation, which extends more than 2 decades in participating in the public education sector in Vermont, I think that there may be folks who would rival Donna in terms of their contribution, but she would certainly be at the top of the list. And I, over the course of my career, have not found somebody who brought their expertise, their attention to detail, their demeanor, and their tenacity to get things right any more than Donna Russo Savage has. It really, from my vantage point, defies an ability to put it into words. And I think that many of you on the call have had opportunities to work with Donna in different capacities. I've been on the receiving end of things that she's written. I've been in the trenches with her, both while she's at the Agency of Education and was working for Legislative Council and in an effort to get things right. And I would say that there are many effective provisions of law in Vermont statutes, and many of them have been made more effective by her work. I'll close by saying that Act 46 in Vermont was probably, if not the most, among the absolute more important pieces of legislation that the state has ever benefited from. And that law, both in its origin and in its implementation, really relied so heavily on Donna and all that she has brought in terms of her professional and personal attributes. So I just wanted to, on behalf of the association and on behalf of myself, add my voice in tribute to Donna today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Maureen is clapping. Are there any other members of the public who wish to be heard? All right. We do have opportunity again at the end of our meeting, just as a reminder. So with that, I'm going to move ahead to agenda item G, and this is the resolution of appreciation for Donna Russo Savage. Whereas Donna Russo Savage has served as the principal assistant to the secretary and a staff attorney at the Agency of Education, and whereas prior to her time at the agency, she worked in the Office of Legislative Counsel, and whereas she is remembered as the scrivener extraordinaire of Act 46 of 2015, which was enacted to create more sustainable models of education in the state by providing substantial equity in the quality and variety of educational opportunities while maximizing operational efficiencies. And whereas during the crafting, deliberations, and passage of Act 46, she always made an extra effort to be of assistance to each legislator and committee involved while successfully endeavoring to remain informative but neutral in her guidance to the General Assembly. And whereas once she joined the agency, her background, knowledge, and guidance proved instrumental as she issued guidance on behalf of the agency, supported the board with rulemaking, drafted model articles of agreement, provided technical assistance to districts, and assisted the General Assembly as it drafted changes to 16 VSA sections 724 and 725, thereby providing a clear and thoughtful path to school districts that wish to withdraw from their supervisory structures. And whereas for the past several years, he has also shared her unique wisdom on the intersection of law, policy, and practice by serving as the agency's point person to field all number of governance-related questions from school boards, attorneys, and superintendents. And whereas no matter her position or the task at hand, she consistently went above and beyond her duties, providing assistance to the agency, the board, and members of the public with patience, courtesy, and respect. And whereas, in addition to her vast expertise, she is remembered by her friends and colleagues for her collaboration, integrity, and professionalism, as well as being a delightful person who is a pleasure to work with and who cares deeply about the education of all Vermont students. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Vermont State Board of Education recognizes and commends the services and contributions of Donna Russo Savage to the state of Vermont. And be it further resolved that her colleagues offer to Donna their gratitude for her unwavering commitment to education in Vermont, as well as their best wishes to her as she embarks on this next chapter of her life with her husband, Stuart, their 3 daughters, and their families. Dated at Winhall, Vermont, this 19th day of July, 2023, by the State Board of Education. So Donna, that doesn't even begin to capture the many things that you've done for the agency, for the board, for the state of Vermont, and we are truly indebted to you for your service. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how delighted I am that I'm retired, but it truly has been a delight working with so many folks. All of you legislators, the public. Public education is such an important, integral part of everybody's life in Vermont, and people care so passionately about it. And it really has been an honor to work with you and to work for this cause. And thank you. Your words are really overwhelming. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And also, I can see that you're in the car. Thank you for making yourself available, on short notice to sort of scoot things up. So I'm glad that you could be with us today. And I see that Heather has her hand raised.
I have to sneak in here before Donna gets off because I know that she wants to. So I, on behalf of the Agency of Education and personally, want to thank you, Donna. We've worked together for 8 years, nearly 8 years. I know that you have served for many decades before that for the state. I want to express my gratitude for you. You are, in my mind, the epitome of an excellent public servant. Your integrity, your humility, about all of the amazing work that you've done for years and years is astounding. There's no question in my mind that our education system, our public education system, our whole education system in Vermont would not be where it is without you. You have been a delight to work with. You are one of the kindest people that I've had the pleasure of getting to meet. And I'm so happy for you on your next journey. And just for the state board, Donna, in true form, I learned was still mentoring some of our new oncoming employees just a couple of days ago, just sending them some real great wisdom, some materials, and it just goes to show what an amazing person she is. So thank you, Donna, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Best of luck.
I'm hoping to make her cry. I think I might have done that a little, so.
All right. Well, thank you, Donna. All right. That puts us a little ahead of schedule in terms of things that we've covered, but I know that Secretary Boucher she's attending a conference today, and she left the conference to be able to attend this first part of our meeting. So Heather, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you for the Secretary's update and the final Act 173 update. And then we'll let you get back to your conference.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I want to say a special welcome and hello to Aaliyah and Gray. My name is Heather Boucher. Welcome. I'm actually the interim secretary of education. You have probably no idea what that means. I operate, or I'm the chief officer for the state education agency. And so we implement all of the rules and regulations that both the General Assembly, which is our legislature, and the State Board of Education develop. Just as a very quick intro. Hello, everyone else. It's great to see you all. It's nice to see your faces. It's been a really tough couple of weeks for our state. I know, as you already know. For my secretary's update today, I will frame it around just a few different components. So I did want to give the board an update on the flooding disaster because there has been an impact on our education system, on our teams at the Agency of Education, and I want to just make sure you're updated on that. I did want to give you a brief update on preparation for readiness regarding the 2200 series. I know that that's been a question that board members have been eager to hear more about. And then as Secretary Samuelson said, I'll close by just giving just a high level summary of the census-based funding advisory group final report, which has recommendations for the Agency of Education, for the board itself, and then for the General Assembly. So I think if it's okay, Chair Samuelson, I'll just go through all of that and then take broader questions at the end if that works for folks. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that sounds fine. Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of our ongoing flooding disaster, as you probably know by now, the center of our state, sort of like the center all the way up from the south to almost the top, has been really affected with some offshoots geographically. So we are now turning, we're still not out of the woods because there's still some random thunderstorms and showers called for throughout this week, which has been really tough because just when we would like to feel like, okay, we can fully turn to recovery and rebuilding, we get some new rain. And so it's just made it a very long-term kind of process. So if you'll recall with Irene, you might have heard the governor say this, with Irene, it happened and then it kind of was done. And so we could more formally say, all right, now we're rebuilding and recovering. This has been much more challenging, I think, both physically, mentally, emotionally, because we have this weather pattern that continues to just kind of be threatening. You know, luckily not major threatening at this point, but we can't tell. And the National Weather Service is doing a great job of trying to keep the State Emergency Operations Center as up to date as they can be. So we have 6 schools who have reported a major impact on typically their structure, typically their basement, and by structure, I mean the structure of, the structural integrity of the school itself. Most of the time, this is a flooded bottom level. So we're actually still compiling that specific list, and it's ongoing. We have we've heard from the large majority of our SU and SDs, supervisory unions and districts for new students, and our independent schools, but we haven't heard from everyone yet. So luckily, the vast majority of schools have not experienced an impact from the flooding, but we do have at this point 6 that have had a major impact. It remains to be seen what that actually will look like in terms of school opening on time. We're still assessing that. There are, I would say, also a handful of schools that are not reporting major impact for the school year or anything like that, but they have had to really scramble to make alternative arrangements for their summer programs because there might have been debris in the way, so the bus couldn't get through to the school. So my real report out is that it's still a very dynamic, ongoing situation. We're doing the very best we can at the state to really monitor, provide supports for our schools and our school personnel. I've personally been reaching out to superintendents to make sure that if there's anything I can do, and my team has also been working with them daily. And that leads me to just a quick update about sort of the role of the Agency of Education. Which is surprising sometimes to folks, but we're actually a core part of the State Emergency Operations Center. This came to light largely during COVID. What we focus on primarily are food. So getting food to emergency food operations where they need to be, because we can actually, when there's a nationally, federally declared disaster like this, we can usually get federal authority to tap into our child nutrition programs. So we can then really start leveraging all those systems that exist for delivering free breakfast and free hot lunch. And really, you saw this happen during COVID, really get to actually deploy those literal meals that are actually stockpiled in some of our storage facilities, and then also the human structures to actually get those meals where they need to go. And so we partner very closely with the Agency of Human Services in that. We also deploy services around homeless families, but particularly students, and we help coordinate some of that work when we have a disaster like this. And then we also, perhaps surprisingly, perhaps not, many of you know Ted Fisher. We have a very strong communications team at the agency. And so starting during the pandemic, we really beefed that arena up in our agency because we needed to, and we've continued to experience a strong need to have a very robust, very good communications arm in our agency. I would say it's so good that actually Ted has been actually pulled into the statewide public information office temporarily for the state. So that's good for the state. It means that we're a little short-staffed on our comm side, our communication side. So just want the state board to know that we're still operating, and we still have communications that are relevant to our regular operations coming out, but there's a bit of a delay sometimes because we're trying to manage new responsibilities on top of existing ones. And then, as I started out, the other piece that we have a strong lead on is really assessing the impact or facilitating the assessment of impact really on our schools, districts, our communities. We now have FEMA staff on the ground visiting and revisiting communities, including trying to assess what the impact, the damage assessment is, trying to understand how to best deploy federal resources. It's really going to be a long road, and I think that we need to consider that perhaps as a board, because I think our communities and our schools as real central hubs of our communities are going to need some continued support. I think there's a real concern for many of us working in the trenches that once we fully moved to rebuilding, to recovery, a lot of the state is just going to kind of move on because they haven't had an impact. And I think that's something that we all need to kind of keep in mind, that there has been a real, decimation of folks' lives and of some schools, and on top of what kids have already been through with COVID, right? And with Irene even before that for some families. I did mention a little bit off camera, but I just wanted to say AOE does have, our Agency of Education does have a number of staff who were evacuated. Some have been able to come back to their homes now, but are engaged in flood cleanup. But some actually sadly have lost their homes and have lost their vehicles. So we're also managing that. We're a small agency. We function in many ways as, we're a very tight agency in terms of care and concern about our folks. So all of that is going on. Just wanted to give the State Board of Ed a sort of high level summary of that. And I think I'll actually pause, which is going against what I said at the beginning, Chair Samuelson, because that's a lot. And I just wanted to see if there are any questions before I move to the next pieces.
Thank you. Board members, any questions?
Sorry, it's
Yes.
Kim. I'm not sure if you can see. Thank you, Heather. And it was really helpful to have insight into all of that. As you think about roles and responsibilities, is there anything specific that you think as a state board we can or should be doing?
I think at this point, not yet. We're still kind of assessing once the figurative dust settles, even though it's actually literal. If you've been through a flooding, there's a lot of dust and some respiratory challenges. So I think more to come on that. I would say one piece I forgot to mention is that there are, and I speak now not to the board as a unit, but maybe to individual board members, there is a considerable need for volunteer efforts, for donations of all kinds. The state is now asking that folks, just all folks who are interested in helping, actually start local. So really, if you are near or live, hopefully no one has had an impact directly on our state board. But if you have not, but you know that near you, there are some communities that are really struggling, I think that's really what the state is really hoping that folks can do, because as you might imagine, there are different levels of support fiscally and volunteer wise. I know Barre needs a lot of support. Montpelier has been very hard hit, but Montpelier has a very strong local volunteer effort that has been deployed. I know that some of our regions down in the south, Ludlow, Londonderry, that area also can use some supports.
Thanks so much, Heather.
Anyone else? All right, hearing none. Heather, I'll turn it over to you for the next part of your presentation.
Great, thank you very much. So just a quick update on our preparation for independent schools under the new 2200 series changes that we know are in effect. So we do have an FAQ doc. It's ready for release. I anticipate it's going to get out this week. That's my goal. As I said, our comms system is a little bit clunky at the moment, but that's still my goal because we're here in terms of the timeline, but it's been fully vetted by legal. It's gone through everything. So that is going to have a lot of the information. And once we release it, I'll make sure the board has a copy. It's going to have a lot of the information that I think folks have been wondering about in terms of how will schools know what they're attesting to, and those kinds of questions. Our attestations are actually, the new attestation is under legal review. It's at the final step. That's very close to also being deployed. And once that has been done, then I will send that to the chair as well. And then we have ongoing office hours and outreach that's continued all along. No more update on numbers or anything like that, because we've moved from trying to get a sense of how many numbers we had, and we got a good sense of that, which I reported on in June. And now we're really, making sure that now that we have a sense of how many schools are looking to get approved for public funds under the new rules, we're moving really more toward getting them the supports they need. And as you'll recall, the large majority of schools are already providing special education services. So this isn't going to be a huge lift for them. That there are a handful, as you recall from last time, that are planning to. Those that are recognized, as we already talked about, have a very high bar. We'll do what we can to help them, but there are no more, there's a moratorium, I will also remind us, on new independent school approvals. So it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to move into this space unless they're already approved. And in fact, it's legally impossible at this moment until the General Assembly rescinds their moratorium. Oh, sorry,
Heather,
I'm done. Any questions? Any questions?
Does this change, I mean, with the new aspects of 2200 that are now in effect, does that change how the agency is going to be conducting requests for reapproval?
I don't think it's going to change it at this moment. We need to kind of see what the impact is. I think what it will do is actually provide some capacity for our team to because they're not going to be working on new approvals. I think they'll be able to actually be much more, there's more capacity then to work with schools for reapprovals. And I think it'll be, as the interim secretary, I think it'll be a very good exercise for me, for us, to actually really understand better, like, what is the optimal size of this team, because we know it's a pretty small team. Everything to do with independent schools has been an unfunded mandate for the agency. So we've had to find staffing within our existing budget. I think I'm looking forward to this time as a real stock take of, like, okay, now that we've had this, and I'm not saying that this is like a great thing, but now that this has been imposed on us, right, from the legislature, that there is no more approval of new independent schools, how does, what does that look like in terms of increased capacity for the existing reapproval system? Are there some real great, is there some real great work that can be done now that we actually couldn't do before, which will then, hopefully, when and if the moratorium is rescinded at some point, will allow us to make a better case for the full body of supports we need for this team.
And just as a reminder, I mean, you'd mentioned this in a prior meeting, but your team handles both, what had been initial approvals as well as reapprovals. And so it's the same group of people that is, working on, one thing versus another. So, taking initial approvals off the table sort of frees up their capacity to focus on the reapprovals.
Exactly. So this is the same team that was working really hard, and we talked about, to actually help the expeditionary school get approved, to actually recommend that approval, and the Pond Brook School at our last meeting. It's the same exact small group of folks. And they also work on post-secondary approvals. So I think that's important as well to keep in mind. And we have at least one that's outstanding right now for that, a post-secondary program approval.
Kim?
Thank you. Heather and maybe Jennifer, is there going to be a point at which, since the state board is charged with the responsibility of approving schools, and now we have this new category, will there be sort of a slate of those who have met the conditions of the attestation, and then you make a recommendation to us, and then we approve that this category of schools is approved for public tuition? I'm trying to think of the mechanics.
Yeah, I think that would be a departure from how we typically have operated or implemented decisions from the state board. So we typically get the rules, the regulations from the state board, and then we go implement. We could certainly think about that, but so for instance, we don't come back under EQS and say we're asking the board to approve all of these schools and acknowledge that they have met EQS. That's something that has, because it's the implementation, it's something that has been afforded to the agency to make that call. Yes, when there are new programs or new schools to be approved or reapproval, we've obviously that's part of the rule process, and it's encoded in the rules. I'd be interested in continuing to talk about that I wonder if
yeah.
it would need to be part of the rules, because what we're doing is entirely consistent with the rules, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the challenge is it's a third category, right? That only became effective as of July 1. And so with the unique responsibility of the state board to approve schools, now we have 3 categories of schools we're not, it's not a wholesale, oh, now everybody that was approved is also approved to receive public tuition. So I was trying to think of the mechanics by law of this category of schools that became effective July 1, and the responsibility for approval is uniquely reserved to the State Board of Ed. So I appreciate that mechanically this is like there's a process that you're implementing to make a determination, and it would seem consistent that you would make a recommendation that those that have completed attestations and you are certifying them to the State Board to be in compliance with your expectations to serve students with special needs, we would take those recommendations, and it would be a different process than like a full new approval or otherwise. But it would seem as though with a third new category of school approved to receive public tuition, there would be a role for the state board to, I don't want to say rubber stamp, but you would be vetting the attestations. We would be making an approval, because this isn't just an implementation question. This is a new category of schools to be approved to receive public tuition.
Understood. I think the intention so far was that this initial approval would be through an attestation process, and then the reapproval would occur as they come up for their regular reapproval. So some will be coming up this year, year 2, year 3, our regular approval for independent schools. Very happy, again, as I said, to discuss with the chair, with the board, whomever. I think I don't see, I understand, and I think it would be fairly, it would be possible certainly for us to actually, once we've collected all the attestations, to put all of that into one green sheet and say, these are the schools, and we're recommending that you approve them. But I also want to note that this was going to, so sorry, Chair Samuelson. So the reason we want this rolled into the regular approval process is because that's when there's a much more robust look at meeting the 2200 series, right? And so the whole point is like, it's not just through attestation and then you're done. It's really like the attestation is because of July 1st deadline, we can't possibly get through a robust review of all of the schools. And so as they come on for reapproval, that's when there's a much deeper dive into how they're actually meeting and addressing the new 2200 series.
So, and that actually goes back to my earlier question. Like, so when you have a school that has been approved and has signed the attestation, but now you're going in to consider the school for reapproval, how, if you know, do these new rules affect the agency's review of the school? Because I'm guessing that there will be some additional layer of, is the school complying with 2229.1, 0.2, 0.3?
Well, again, the primary change is that all schools who receive public funds need to really simplify it, need to be able, need to provide special education services for students. So we already have that process in place because we already have a number of independent schools who actually are approved by our special education team to provide those services. So it's not going to be a huge leap. It's the same content, if you will, that will be required to actually meet. It just will be for all schools who are interested or striving to get public education dollars. Does that clarify? Does that help?
Yeah. Before I pop back to Kim, anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, just Heather,
Will there be just one application process, and schools will indicate during that time whether they are applying to be approved to receive students on public funds, or will there be two different processes? Will we see, for example, my committee, will we see any of the schools that are coming up that are not seeking public funds but are seeking approval under the same rules that we have right now, and that we had before July 1? Will that be a separate process and a separate set of schools? And then we'll just
I think our intention for the sanity of all and the capacity of all is to have it that there is an approval process for independent schools, some of whom are approved to operate, some of whom are approved to accept public dollars. So we haven't actually fully worked that through, but from where I'm sitting, I don't know why we would want to have a separate process, because I think what we would do is, okay, again, you're going through this process. For some of the schools who have already been getting approval all along, they've already been doing the same kind of thing that they will be needing to do under the 2200 series. So we already have that system in place. So we would then have a new coding, if you will, or a new categorization of what the independent school is approved for. So so as Kim said, there are 3 designations of schools now. There's recognized, which doesn't have to go through the approval process at all. There's approved, which is they want to be approved. They want to meet the existing requirements to be an approved school, except for those that would allow them to have access to public funds. And then there's the third category, which is access to public funds. I don't know why it would behoove us to have a whole separate process at this point. It just logically does not make sense to me, but again, happy to hear more on that if that's what seems like it would be a good idea. I think it would make it, I'm trying to streamline processes given the size of the agency and the board's time, but certainly would be open to other ideas for certain.
Lyle?
So yeah, Heather, thank you for that explanation. And I guess for the committee, my vision is we would get the green sheets, and the green sheets would include and the schools approved for public tuition or not. And that would be the significant difference that we might see as a committee. Is that correct?
That's my intention, Lyle. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Kim?
And I think for the renewals, and I guess there won't be new approvals just yet, but renewals, that makes sense. I wouldn't have pictured that to be different. It seems as though there'll be a different layer of vetting on renewals to ensure that they're complying with the ability to serve students with special needs. And those sections of the rule that apply to those seeking to receive public tuition. Again, on this first round where we're approving them to receive public tuition, it seems like we should have some role in that approval before public tuition is paid, because that's our role. So I don't know, Jennifer, I don't see that adds anything to the agency's responsibilities, but I do take it as our responsibility. So I think it may make sense if there seems to be gray area on that. I don't know if we get like an outside legal opinion or whatever, just to make sure before any school is approved to receive public tuition, it would be a departure for the state board not to approve.
So I hear what you're saying, and I think maybe if I'm understanding the process, the agency, because they are the ones with, the capacity and the responsibility of interfacing with independent schools with regard to the approval process. So Heather, I think I heard you say that the attestation clause is currently under legal review, should be finalized shortly. So my guess, and I just want to check my assumptions here, so let me know if I'm wrong, but that attestation clause is going to be sent out to all approved independent schools. And then once you get the signed attestation clauses back, you will compile them into a green sheet. And then it would then go to the independent school approval committee for their review, and then come before the full state board. Kind of like what we've done, with individual schools that are up for approval or reapproval. This would have like a list that will, be vetted in the first instance by the agency, in the second instance by the independent school approval committee, and then ultimately by the state board. And my guess is that we would have to do that in a somewhat quick pace because I know that school is starting, and so we would want to make sure that we have the time to do that. I don't want to interfere with the school's ability to get the public funds from the LEA, and I'm not sure how all of that timing dovetails, but conceptually, does that timeline work, and substantively, does that kind of fit with what everyone's thinking? I'm not hearing any objection. So.
Yeah, no. That, I think that sounds like that makes sense and is most consistent with process and with sort of the responsibilities under the law. So that makes sense to me. I think the timeline question, since our August meeting is the 9th, and if students were to enroll in a school that, isn't attesting or hasn't been approved, I know we've been raising concerns about that for a bit. And I fully understand that the further vetting will come with renewals, but we definitely have been asking, since we've been approving schools, beginning in the fall and probably earlier, to make sure like that approval for 3 years or whatever it was going to still mean they'd have to comply with the requirements when they became as recent as June 29th. We were asking that question to make sure that these approvals were going to be subject to the change in the rules that took effect July 1. So do you think the process you described makes sense, Jennifer? I don't know if that means there's an anticipated special meeting. I don't know what the independent schools committee timeline is, or even yours, Heather, for receiving attestations.
So, and Heather,
like
maybe you and I can keep in touch on this. And if we need to warn a special meeting, we certainly will, because again, like I don't want to disrupt the process. I just want to make sure that everything's flowing the way it should flow.
So typically the independent school approval subcommittee would meet on August 2nd. We meet on the first Wednesday of the month. So that list of schools from the agency would have to come before the committee at that meeting. Right now, I don't know. We canceled our July meeting, not having any schools ready to be considered, and I don't know if we'll have that list by then, but that will be the timeline for us anyways.
It's hard for me to think we would have the full list by then. As I said, the assurances document is going to go out this week. That's the plan, by Friday. So, we'll do our very best to hear back from all of the schools.
And obviously we want the schools to be thoughtful about, they're signing the attestation. Like, I don't think there's any value in saying, hurry up and get it back in and let's hope you got it right. Like, I don't think that's the right answer either. So if we need to warn a special meeting to accomplish this, I'm fully committed to that. But I think, Heather, why don't you and I follow up, and then we'll just kind of plot this out, see if we need to have a special meeting, when that meeting would be, how to sort of dovetail with the date by which schools would be expecting payments from the LEA, and just make sure that everything is flowing. Lyle, I'm going to go to you. I do know that Heather has another update, and I think you probably also need to get back to your conference. So let me take this question from Lyle, and then we'll turn it back to you for the last part of your update.
Sure, thank you. And I won't belabor it, but just a comment perhaps that this is not new information to the schools. And so they're aware of the attestation piece. I don't know that an August 2nd deadline would be a surprise or uncomfortable for them, because I can't imagine they haven't already thought this through, and they want the tuition money if they want the tuition money. I think those that probably have decided they're not going to do it won't. So I thank you, Jennifer, for suggesting a different meeting time if we need that. But there may be two layers of this, those that have already decided and those that are on the fence. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kim, final words.
Yeah, that's it. I was just gonna say to that point, and not sure about your timing, Heather, with the attestation going out, but I didn't know if being mindful of August 2nd like gives you more information on a deadline for their return if they're interested in receiving public tuition, because to Lyle's point, it won't be new news, and there is likely to be motivation to return paperwork if there's like a timeline described about what comes after that, just to make sure that they get public tuition and Tom's group has an expectation regarding timeline. So you guys
Yep,
can
I've
share
heard
that.
loud and clear. I've heard that that's the next meeting time.
Sorry.
I'll take that into consideration for sure. I do have to leave, so I do want to, I'm sorry about that, but I do want to say a few things about Act 173, Chair Samuelson, if that's okay, or from the final report of, we call it the Act 173 final report. That's technically not correct, and I'm trying to correct myself because it's actually the final report of the Census-Based Funding Advisory Group that was actually chartered under Act 173. So I was going to focus primarily on the final recommendations for the agency, but then also just give you a high level of, again, recommendations for the SBE and then recommendations for the General Assembly. So this, just as background, this advisory group has been meeting for I want to say 3 years, 2.5 or 3 years now, was again part of the initial Act 173 legislation, and was charged with providing guidance and advice in an ongoing way. You've had presentations from that group to the board, to both the board, to the agency, to the General Assembly with respect to not only the funding, but also the implementation of practices under Act 173. So the final recommendations for the AOE are framed around largely professional development. And so there's a strong sense that there's incredible variability, too much variability in the implementation of multi-tiered systems of support throughout the state, MTSS. And so that is something we're going to definitely take into account. We have provided, since 2009, 2013. So MTSS has been in the EQS for a very long time. We have provided professional learning and professional development opportunities, yet there still is a strong sense that there's a lot of variability in terms of implementing those practices in the field. So that's something we're definitely taking into account. Other states have developed some comprehensive models about how to deliver professional development. We'll take a look at those. And part of that would also be the recommendation to identify the LEAs that most need support. And I think that has been ongoing as well, but our DQS, our district quality standards, will allow us to get an even more robust, I would say systematic peek at that, and really then be able to target supports after that. The second recommendation is for continued work from the agency on helping LEAs document maintenance of effort under IDEA and how that interfaces with Act 173. So there's still, the advisory group's recommendation is that there still is confusion, there's still frustration, there's still a need for continued work and guidance in that area. And so we'll continue on that. I would also say that we still are in a bit of a transition period in terms of the implementation even of that new funding model, and that's where this maintenance of effort comes into play. So the maintenance of effort is a federal regulation. I think we have had some disagreement among sort of national actors and our compliance and monitoring team about what is required. And so we'll continue to work on that. The agency, has to rely on its own general counsel and on its own interpretation of our experts on what we should be doing, not a national entity, but we obviously try to find the middle ground for that. And so more information on that will be forthcoming. And then those were the two that were primary for the Agency of Education. So working still on some additional professional development training and models, or a model, statewide model for MTSS implementation, and then documenting MOE, maintenance of effort. And then for the SBE, their recommendations are to provide greater clarity to the LEAs on what MTSS is through rulemaking. And then also, I think that was the primary one for the SBE that I could find. Then there's additional accountability and oversight for full implementation from the General Assembly. It remains to be seen what that actually means. It's kind of, it's a broad statement at this point. I think it would be tough. That will remain to be seen if the General Assembly agrees and what that additional oversight and accountability looks like. It's a little unclear to me, oversight and accountability of whom? Of the LEAs, of the State Board of Ed. I mean, it's there's just some more conversation to be had about that. And then one specific piece that the advisory group is recommending the General Assembly focus on is there's not a cap on what independent schools can charge for special education services under Act 173, and there's a concern that for some LEAs, if not many or most, they will run up against what their new allocation is under Act 173 if there's no kind of stopgap mechanism or a cap for what independent schools can request for their reimbursements, as there is for public schools. So they have, their funds are restricted, and their recommendation to meaning the public entities have a restriction on what, they get a lump sum of what they can spend on special education. And the recommendation from the advisory group is that there isn't a similar stopgap measure for what independent schools are hoping to be or requesting from LEAs to be reimbursed for. That was very fast. I believe that the Chair Samuelson, I believe that the report was submitted to both the State Board, but also the General Assembly. Let me know for sure if you did not get that, because I believe that it was supposed to be submitted to you, and I saw that you were listed, the State Board was listed as getting it, or was supposed to be getting it, but let me know.
I'm not sure I did.
Okay. I wondered about that, because I actually wondered, it wasn't listed in our agenda items, our materials, and if we drop the ball on that, we've had a lot going on. I apologize. But I think I know it was addressed to the board and the General Assembly.
Okay. Well, and there is, of course, Jenny Samuelson. Like I don't know. I don't think I received anything though. So
I'm not trying to put you on the spot at all.
This was all news. So.
It's more of a question, like, did you get this? Because it's out there.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know if it makes sense, but I do have to run. And so maybe we get the final report out to folks, and then at the next meeting, I can certainly answer any questions.
Okay.
Or from a more detailed dive into the report. I'm not sure that makes
sense. Could I ask you a
question,
Heather? Could I ask you a quick question before you go? When you say national entity on the MOE determination, are you referring to CIFER, the Center for IDA Fiscal Resources? That because
no, there's another entity called like Education Fund Services or something like that. I
Yeah,
got the name.
so Cipher is U.S. Department of Education, and my understanding is that they have given the agency a recommendation on MOE that is counter to what council is saying. So, in fact, somebody just asked me about that. So perhaps I'll look forward to reading the report. It sounds like this MOE thing, this issue around the MOE and the MFS needs to get settled, but certainly Cipher is not, I wouldn't characterize, if that's who you're talking about, I wouldn't go to the national organization. That's the U.S. Department of Education.
Yeah.
And they're the people who.
No, that's
make
not
the
who I'm
decision.
talking about.
Okay, all right. So,
But yeah,
but
so my understanding.
I
is
know the
we're-
Cipher has weighed in, right, on that. So I'll look in the report, because that's confusing to me that there's still this uncertainty around what counts and what doesn't.
Agreed. Well, agreed, because we would not of ignoring federal advice or guidance at the state agency. So
Okay, I'll circle
agree.
back on that. I'll look forward to the report. I just wanted to be clear. We were thinking about the same entities when you said that. So I'll
Yeah, I
circle
think
back
we
with you.
were.
Oh, and I'll take a look at the report. Thanks.
I think we're thinking of different partners in that space.
So yes, let's put this as an agenda item for future meetings. I see Kim has her hand up. Heather, I know you need to leave.
It was just quick. It was in the vein of Tammy's question because I was curious if we needed like the Attorney General's opinion, or like if there is a question of differing legal opinions, then I think it needs to be resolved. If it's a federal opinion and a state opinion, and it's a federal law, we probably need to clarify. But it sounds like Tammy is pointing to different sources for information that may be clarified in the report. So I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that this would be an Attorney General issue. I mean, this is really about education law. So I think we're pretty skilled at interpreting.
Well,
No, I'm
it's
sorry.
been well, but wait a minute. This has been a sticking point since 2017, right? Like this is not a new issue. So that's why I'm asking. This seems a little unusual to me. This isn't resolved because this has been discussed since 2017. And there have been sort of this banter back and forth about what counts and what doesn't, both for MFS and for MOE. And this isn't just because there are two pieces. There's the MFS, which is the state portion, and then there's the MOE, that's the district portion. So I'll look forward to reading the report. I'm just a little surprised that's still an outstanding issue and that there may be a conflicting interpretation on the part of the agency from what the federal government. And my understanding is Cipher and OSEP have both weighed in on this. So I'll read the report and check, but
and there could also be multiple. There could be a misinterpretation on the side of the field as well. So yeah, and I'm at a bit of a disadvantage here because I don't have my experts who are working in this space to be actually able to explain a bit more about what's going on with that.
Yeah,
obviously,
let's just table it until we read.
I mean,
so.
But I will say that we want to actually address this. We want everyone to be on the same page.
It's a super important issue. So that's why I caught my eye, or yours, is like, this really does need to get resolved. And if it needs to get resolved in regulation, then the state board should do something about that. But let's read the report. I just want to clarify who the outside entity was, whether it was Cipher or not. So I look forward to reading the report.
It was not who I was thinking of. It was an earlier conversation with a national nonprofit in this space.
That's something different. No, I know about that conversation. This is something different. So I look forward to reading the report. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Go ahead. I know you've had a lot on your plate. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, Heather.
It's nice to see your faces. I'm sorry I can't stay for the whole meeting today. I'll be there for the next one though.
All righty.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, so this puts us to agenda item H, which is the EQS committee update. Tammy, Kim, does one of you want to jump in here?
We don't have anything else for the board to review at this time. That's really the most important thing that everybody wants to hear. But the committee will be reconstituted and with some new members coming up in the next few weeks, we will be taking in the standards that the Act One group is proposed to give some consideration to. We need to sort of stand up a process around that. The EQS rules, my understanding from a back and forth this morning with legal counsel is, those should be submitted to Secretary of State sometime this week. So lots of good work, but we're moving on. We have 3 public comment period, public hearings set for this fall in September and October, and are on a timetable to have that process wrapped up in time for any changes to be considered by the board at the December meeting. And if need be, then, if we can't resolve them in the December meeting, then to try to finalize any remaining changes by the board by the January meeting. So stay tuned. There'll be more EQS work in front of the full board, but not this meeting. So.
Do you have the public comment hearing dates?
Yeah, I can circulate them to the board. They're in the filing. And
well, I was just thinking we could notify members of the public.
I don't have. I can look them up right now. They're on my calendar.
Yeah,
Maureen has already set up the Teams sites and everything. I can look them and come back to.
Well, actually, I've got it. It looks like the first one is Wednesday, September 13th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. The second one is Thursday, September 28th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the third one is Tuesday, October 3rd from 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m.
And then the intent is for the subcommittee to spend the next 4 to 6 weeks working through those comments in a series of subcommittee meetings, and again, to have a document sort of out of committee and back to the board to look at, back to the board by the end of November, so that it's ready for discussion at the December meeting. But also noting that we have no idea what we're going to receive for public comment. And so, it could be that we have some substantial changes. And if we do, then it may take more than one meeting for the board to resolve those, the full board to resolve those. And so on the schedule, we have sort of a placeholder to say, certainly before this full board at this December meeting, but also acknowledging that if we need another meeting, then we still have the December meeting. And that gives us enough time to still go through LCAR and have things in place for the rules to go into effect next summer as intended.
Great, thank you. Any other committee members? Kim?
I was just going to say, Kim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, those are the dates I had in my calendar as well. And I will look forward to sort of, as Tammy mentioned, we received from the Act One working group their recommendations for the ethnic studies standards. And so our committee will be taking that in. And I think we'll check to see if, as they had done with the recommendations for EQS, if it works with our schedule to possibly invite them to present them to the full board. So we all know what the committee is diving into a little more deeply and have a better understanding of the process. It is different than establishing rules. So adopting standards is not something any of us on this board, or I'm not exactly sure the last time content standards have been adopted, but it is a different process than rules. So we will clarify what that is and be able to share that. Maybe if there's enough time on the August meeting, we could do that.
Great. All right. Any comments or questions from other board members? Okay. Hearing none. Why don't we do have a break scheduled, so I think we are on schedule. Let's take a quick break and we will return at 10:05 a.m. So board members, if you can turn off your cameras and your microphones, and I'll see everyone back here in about 15 minutes. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is item J. This is the Rule Series 2200 Committee Update. And as you all will recall, at our May meeting, the board agreed that the goals of Act One should be extended to approve independent schools. These goals include promoting critical thinking, regarding the history, contributions, and perspectives of ethnic groups and social groups, including content and related instructional materials and methods that enable students to explore safely the questions of identity and membership in ethnic groups and social groups, race equality and racism, facilitating a welcoming environment for all students, while taking into account parent concerns about bias or exclusion of ethnic groups or social groups, and ensuring engagement opportunities that provide families a welcoming means of raising any concerns about their child's experience as it bears on race or ethnic or social group identity at school. The board further agreed that the appropriate mechanism for applying these goals to approved independent schools is through our Rule Series 2200, which are the rules that pertain to independent school approvals. Thus, even though the Rule Series 2200 was just open last year and underwent some fairly significant updates that went into effect only 2.5 weeks ago, the board felt very strongly that it was important work that needed to get done. And so we've decided to piggyback on the extensive work that's already been done by the Education Quality Standards Committee to their work updating Series 2000 and work to align Rule Series 2200 with the spirit and goals of Act 1. So we've reconvened the 2200 committee. We have Tom and Kim again serving on the committee, and I again will be serving as the chair. The plan is for us to meet a few times over the next few weeks, and we hope to have a draft to the full board by August with the goal of reopening the Rule Series early this fall. So any questions or comments? All righty. With that, I don't know if Katie Ballard is with us yet.
I am.
Terrific. All right. Well, this is going to take us to agenda item K, which is the Special Education Advisory Panel update by Katie Ballard. And just as a reminder, Katie came, I believe it was in December last year with an update, maybe early this year. These are updates that Katie will be bringing a few times a year. So Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell us what work you're working on.
Jennifer, I
Thanks
just
so
wanted
much.
to, hey Katie, I just wanted to make sure Jennifer could see Richard's hand was up, but I don't know if it's old or new.
Oh, Richard, did you have a question? And thank you, Kim.
You're
No, I'm sorry. I was moving my cursor.
No worries. All right, thank you. All right, so Katie, back
Hi,
to you.
everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. I apologize. I think I was supposed to come last month, but my daughter had broken her leg and then was graduating, so it was crazy. So thank you for your patience in that. I just want to first and foremost say that I think it is no surprise that this year has been, even though it has been exciting to be coming out of the pandemic a little bit more in the past year and seeing things kind of come back together, I think for those of us dealing with special ed, it has probably been more of a challenging year with staff shortages and just some of the big conversations happening around our state. As I shared earlier in the year, the Special Ed Advisory Panel has kind of really focused on 3 different areas this year. And one is critical staff shortage, one is independent schools and the use of independent schools when it comes to publicly funded special ed placement students, especially. And the last area that we've really spent some time looking at is exclusionary discipline. So the use of restraint and seclusion and informal restraint and seclusion practices across our state as it relates especially to students with disabilities. But of course, as we always say, students with disabilities are first and foremost, general education students first. As we've learned over the year, there's been a lot of changes at the Agency of Education this year, which I don't think will come as a surprise to anybody that it has made it slightly more challenging for our panel in terms of being able to follow some of our mandated required topics and to be able to kind of stay on top of things just with limited agency staff available at times. We are currently working with Interim Secretary Boucher and Meg, Priscilla, to really try and figure out how do we continue to partner with the agency on these very important topics and also not become too much of a strain on their resource and their staff. So we are kind of in that place where we're working on trying to wrap up those 3 areas that I mentioned. We had to, unfortunately, due to quorum, cancel our full day in-person June meeting. So we are catching up over this summer, and we'll be finalizing those recommendations that we'll be making to the Agency of Education in those 3 areas. But knowing that you folks are going to be looking more at Rule 2200, I would just offer and say that if there's anything that we as a panel can do in that conversation, I would be more than happy to make sure that our group that's been really focused on some of those areas is available, or myself could be involved. So please just let us know if there's anything on that. Next year we will be, and I say next year, as I just said, we're wrapping up this year. So I apologize, but we are kind of in this weird transition place. But next year we're really going to be looking at transitions, both into from early childhood and after they are 18 and into the older ages where they can stay in school until they're 22. So I think those are kind of the priority areas that we've really identified. We've also really identified as a panel that our hope to continue to find the places where our work overlaps with other groups, including the state board, in the coming year, and really finding ways to be supportive to the conversations across the state. There's just been a lot of places where it seems like special education, especially related to discipline, to the use of those independent schools, to the inability of some of our students to be in school because they don't have paras or other staffing to be able to safely attend. Those are kind of the areas that we really are feeling like continue to come up. And so as conversations unfold in the coming year, if there's any of those places that we could offer any sort of recommendations or guidance to the state board, we would be happy to be a voice in those conversations as well.
Thank you, Katie. So a couple questions. How often does your committee meet? I mean, are you sort of like on a...
The full panel meets once a month. Our executive committee meets once a month. Typically, we only meet over during the school year. But because we did not get to have our June meeting, we have 2 meetings coming up. One is the end of July and one is the beginning of August to wrap up. And then we'll kick off the beginning of year stuff at the end of August.
Okay. And if you said this, I'm sorry, I missed it, but when is the report going to the agency?
Our hope is that by the end of August, we'll be able to send that, but it may be the 1st or 2nd week of September. Our goal would also be to send it to you folks as well, if you would be interested in having that.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. Board members, any comments or questions?
Thank you. It's nice to have this touch point over the course of the year with the body of work that your group's doing, Katie. So thank you.
I will say we really have appreciated the opportunity to engage with the state board more this year. And one thing that our group really appreciated as we were talking about the end of the year was the conversation with the EQS subcommittee group. So I just also want to take a minute to just recognize and appreciate the ability to engage in that body of work, but also the ability to feel heard and seen, which I think was felt by a lot of our families and parents who serve on the panel, myself included. So I do just want to take a minute to recognize especially Tammy and Kim and your willingness to really take the time to make sure that we were present and a part of that. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, Well, Katie, thank you so much for coming. This has been really helpful. And I think we all, I'm seeing lots of heads nodding. We would love to see the report when it's done. And, we'd love to have you back again to talk about it. So maybe we can plan for something early to mid-fall.
Absolutely. So I'll make sure to send that to you, Jennifer. And then I would say October would be a really good time for an update depending on your agenda. But somewhere after that, I think we would be able to have a pretty robust update about all of those topics and where we're going in the next year.
Great. Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. So I will make a note for October, and then we will circle back with you, probably sometime in September to set that up.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, so since we don't have an agenda item L today, this has been a very short meeting, which I think I feel like I say this every meeting, but it continues to be true. I know board members are putting in a lot of time outside of our monthly meetings to make these meetings flow as well as they do. So it's really a testament to all of you that things are happening, with great frequency outside of these monthly meetings. So we're going to keep it short today. This brings us to future meeting planning. I do believe we will have Teacher of the Year presentations next month. So these are, many of you all remember, like there are, 3, maybe 4 final candidates who come and they present to the board, and we are given a rubric by which we sort of assess the presentations and I think the ultimate decision is made by the secretary, but it will give us a chance to see the finalists and to ask questions of them and hear about the good work that they're doing. So I think we will have that. We will probably have an EQS committee update. We'll have a 2200 committee update. And then the other thing that I noted from last month is that we had asked the Expeditionary School to come back in August to provide an update as well. Anything that I'm forgetting?
We hope to have an independent school approval
Okay.
date as well. If we can make that August 2nd deadline, then by the 9th, we should have something.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Kim?
Jen, I was just gonna say, should we reach out to Amanda to see if they would like to come and give a brief presentation of the standards, and then we would have an update on what to expect for process for the full board regarding that?
So my only thought with that is I've only heard 5 people say that they're able to attend our August meeting. With that in mind, I think it might make more sense to put it off maybe to September, just so that we've got the full board so that we're all,
Okay.
Oriented at the same time. I think that would be
Okay.
helpful.
I think that makes sense.
And also,
Should I
there's
reach-
just going to be a lot of public educators away then,
Yeah.
Kim, like having it in September, I think might work better, both because of numbers and
That makes sense.
and also making sure that, the public will be available to hear. I think there'll just be a lot of educators on vacation then.
Yep. Makes sense.
Anything else? All right. So this takes us to our second public comment period. If there are any members of the public who wish to be heard. All right. I'm not hearing anybody. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Kim, seconded by Lyle. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please speak now.
Tom's opposed.
Oh, it's delayed. My hand is delayed.
It was kind of funny.
Blame it on Teams, why don't you?
Just watch me.
All right. Hearing no objections or abstentions, we stand in adjournment. Thank you guys all very much and have a great rest
Thank
of your
you.
day.
Thank you.